It is time. It is time to get emotional about the past. Get yourself a box of tissues, sit somewhere comfortable, and preferably alone, if you don't want anyone to see you cry. I'm just joking. I've compiled a series of letters that really give a glimpse into people's lives from the past. And not only that, but I've specifically chosen the heartbreaking ones. Why? Well, I think it's human to go through complicated emotions. My goal by the end of this video is to make you feel a connection with these people. History is not just a series of dates and events, it's also the stories of regular people like you and me. Our first letter comes from Mesopotamia 3,700 years ago, during the time of Hammurabi. Remember the Hammurabi Code? Yeah. A slave woman named Dabitum sent a clay tablet to her master with a request. Tell my master your slave girl Dabitum sends the following message. What I have told you now has happened to me. For 7 months, this unborn child was in my body. But for a month now, the child has been dead and nobody wants to take care of me. May it please my master to do something lest I die. Come visit me and let me see the face of my master. Why did no present from you arrive for me? And if I have to die, let me die after I have seen again the face of my master. From this letter, we assume she had developed a romantic relationship with her master. If I had to guess, I would assume she was a domestic servant to a wealthy noble. In ancient times, it was very common for wealthy and powerful men to develop relationships with their servants. Marriage was a strictly political affair and a social obligation. Romance and passion, on the other hand, was found elsewhere. As a side note, I think it's important to remember that women in general did not have as much agency in those days. They depended on the protection and provisions of a man to survive. Even a freed woman was always associated with a male guardian, her father, and after marriage, her husband. Now, in ancient times, it was also pretty much expected for powerful men to have several mistresses. From the text, it does look like the woman had developed deep feelings for that man. Perhaps she was his favorite. She would constantly receive gifts from him. He would bombard her with declarations of love and affection. He would tell her she was the most beautiful woman. But after carrying his child and giving birth to a stillborn infant, she is left alone. And it's this silence that hurts more than anything. What happened? Why doesn't he care anymore? Is he seeing someone else? It's heartbreaking to think of the pain she endured and how she's been discarded. And in this state of total desperation, she is clinging to the hope of possibly seeing his face again. May it please my master to do something, lest I die. She repeated that twice. She's dealing with betrayal and isolation after having gone through a traumatic event. Considering her status as a slave woman, she went through great lengths to find a scribe for her message. If we put aside the power dynamics of this relationship, we realize that the same story still happens today. There are many stories of women who are left alone after and sometimes even during a pregnancy. The transition into motherhood can repel some men who suddenly are no longer attracted to their partner. It's a sad reality that unfortunately has always existed. An interesting aspect of this letter is that it ignores the standard ways of addressing the slave master with reverence, skipping traditional polite introductory phrases. Dabitum makes herself into a speaker and someone of equal importance. Of course, having an intimate relationship with a master could elevate the social positioning of women. She most likely had access to a more luxurious lifestyle provided to her by her master. But what happened to Dabitum? The name Dabitum appears in 2 old Babylonian legal documents from Sippar, which is the city she lived in. We don't know for sure if it's the same Dabitum who had a miscarriage or another one. But let's just imagine it's the same girl. The documents record that a man named Calcetum married Dabitum, who was a former slave and the adopted daughter of Naritu. Another document, written 24 years later, establishes that the couple, still married, were childless and had adopted a daughter, Ahatani, to support them. If this is the same Dabitum, then we know she got freed and had a successful marriage, which is amazing, but unfortunately she became infertile. Did her miscarriage cause her infertility? Maybe. Did the memory of her stillborn infant haunt her for the rest of her life? I think it's the type of event that is difficult to erase and will shape your life forever. In any case, I like to imagine that she found peace and love in her new life as a freed woman, a wife, and a mother to an adopted daughter. It's interesting how destiny gave her an adopted daughter while she herself was apparently adopted. Hi, the sponsor of this video is me. If you discovered me through my shorts, you've probably seen a lot of historical and classical paintings. Well, if you're interested in learning more, I've created a guide specifically for you. I teach you how to analyze a painting by interpreting the symbolism, the composition, the characters, the story, the colors, everything. I will teach you how to be a pro at reading paintings. No more awkward wandering in museums. You will be able to flex in front of your friends with all your knowledge. Isn't that just amazing? Okay, back to the video. Romans loved dogs. One of the reasons why we know this is because they created elaborate tombs for their dogs, and they inscribed some of the most heartfelt epitaphs I have ever read. 2,000 years ago, a man buried his dear dog and made a marble tomb with a very heartfelt inscription. Bedewed with tears, I have carried you, our little dog, as in happier circumstances I did 15 years ago. So now, Patrice, you will no longer give me 1,000 kisses, nor will you be able to lie affectionately round my neck. You were a good dog, and in sorrow I have placed you in a marble tomb, and I have united you forever to myself when I die. You readily matched a human with your clever ways. Alas, what a pet we have lost. You, sweet Patrice, were in the habit of joining us at table and fawningly asking for food in our lap. You were accustomed to lick with your greedy tongue the cup which my hands often held for you, and regularly to welcome your tired master with a wagging tail. It's such a beautiful and heartbreaking tribute to a dog's life and legacy, which can be so impactful in a person's life. I love how the owner mentions the small things like joining the family at the table and asking for food, or welcoming him home with a wagging tail. It's so thoughtful and sweet. It's no wonder that he feels as if his dog is a part of himself, because these repetitive actions become an important aspect of your daily life and part of your little universe. I find it heartwarming that the master decided to unite himself with his dog by being buried at the same place. I can imagine you would only want to be buried with the most important person in your life, and that spot was reserved for Patrice. He was the goodest dog. It's a nice reminder that humans have always loved their pets. Love, friendship, and grief have always been there and have always caused the greatest joy and pain. Our third story comes from Egypt. 1800 years ago, an Egyptian soldier named Aurelius Polion wrote a letter back home to his brother, sister, and mother, and the content is heartbreaking. I pray that you are in good health night and day, and I always make obeisance before all the gods on your behalf. I do not cease writing to you, but you do not have me in mind. But I do my part writing to you always, and do not cease bearing you in mind and having you in my heart. But you never wrote to me concerning your health, how you are doing. I am worried about you because although you received letters from me often, you never wrote back to me so that I may know how you ... While in Pannonia, I sent letters to you, but you treat me so as a stranger. I sent 6 letters to you. The moment you have me in mind, I shall obtain leave from the consular commander, and I shall come to you, so that you may know that I am your brother. The rest of the letter is more difficult to comprehend because of all the gaps, but essentially Aurelius is sending his regards to all his family members and giving instructions to soldiers to send the message to its destination. What gets me is the desperation and pure disappointment in his writing. Poor Aurelius feels so alone and homesick and is just desperately trying to connect, but his family is ignoring him. I guess ghosting has always existed ever since the creation of the postal code 2,500 years ago. Aurelius was stationed in Pannonia, which is now modern Hungary, and sent his letter to Egypt, his homeland. Hungary is quite far from Egypt. Aurelius may have volunteered for the pay and for the food that legions got. However, that doesn't mean that he knew that he was going to be posted so far away from home. The letter was written in Greek and was found outside a temple in the town of Teptunis in the Fayum region of Egypt. It was found more than a century ago by an archaeological expedition led by Bernard Grenfell and Archer Hunt. The letter was in a pretty bad shape, hence why it was not decoded until very recently. In fact, the letter was made out of papyrus, which can decompose very quickly, sometimes within 50 years. The dry climate of Egypt definitely helped its preservation. Grant Adamson, a doctoral candidate at Rice University, translated the papyrus using infrared images of it, a technology that makes the text more readable. The area of Fayum, where this letter was found, is popular for its mummy portraits. The man in question might have looked like any of these portraits. During the period of this letter, Egypt was under Roman occupation but had previously received Greek influences under the Ptolemaic dynasty. This man's home was a cultural melting pot of Egyptian, Greek, and Roman influences. Call it the ancient equivalent of multiculturalism. According to Adamson, Aurelius would have been multilingual, communicating in Greek and Egyptian back home and in Latin within the Roman army. Aurelius Polion was literate, and literacy was rarer than it is now, but his handwriting, spelling, and Greek grammar are erratic. Adamson isn't sure if the soldier's family responded to his plea or if Polion got leave to see them. It's very unlikely that he got leave from the Roman army. But it appears that this letter did arrive home since it was found in Egypt. Soldiers today have obviously an easier time communicating and traveling back home. Thanks internet, thanks airplanes. In comparison, Aurelius would have had to travel for a month to go back home in Egypt. But still, we notice some common themes that connect both ancient and modern soldiers. The message reminds me of how soldiers and veterans oftentimes feel isolated from their community. Life just continues moving on for everybody else while you are stationed in another continent for the majority of the year. These aspects of military service have always existed. The feeling of isolation and alienation seems to be a common thread across the ages. Around the same time, a 20-year-old Roman woman died. A tombstone was set up by Quintus Oppius Secundus for his wife Agileia Prima, who was also called Auguria. The first part of the epitaph is written by her husband, however, on the second part, Auguria takes over. To the eternal consecrated house, and to Agileia Prima, who is also known as Auguria, wife beyond eternity, most chaste and modest and frugal, who loved her husband and his house and all his possessions innocently. Quintus Oppius Secundus, her husband, made this for the deserving one and for himself. At the time I was begotten, nature granted me twice 10 years, upon the fulfillment of which on the 7th day thereafter, freed of the laws that binds one to life, I was given over to unending rest. This life was given to me. So Oppius, do not fear Lethe, for it is foolish to lose joy of life while fearing death at all times. For death is the nature, not the punishment of mankind. Whoever happens to be born, therefore also faces to die. Master Oppius, husband, do not lament me because I have preceded you. I await your arrival in the eternal marriage bed. Be well, my survivors, and all other men and women. Be well. Lethe was one of the rivers of the underworld of Hades. It caused the drinker to forget his past. I'm not quite sure if the message was written by Auguria herself, or at least part of the message was written by her, or it was more of a conventional form of messaging, but in any case, I find it very sweet. Auguria first informs the reader that she died shortly after her 20th birthday, and then addresses her husband, advising him not to spend the rest of his life mourning her. He is to enjoy his life, and she will await his arrival in the afterlife. It's a very positive way of viewing death and separation from your loved ones. She is giving permission to her husband to move on and to remain joyful in life despite the fact that she is no longer there. It's a selfless act to genuinely want the happiness of people around you even if you're no longer involved. Having lost a close relative a few months back, this message hits close to home. A few weeks after my relative died, I started feeling guilt every time I would feel bits of joy. I felt like something was wrong with me. Shouldn't I be mourning? Shouldn't I be feeling sad? Isn't it disrespectful to just continue going on and living life and feeling joy after you have lost someone so important. And the reality is that your loved ones would not want you to remain in darkness. Life continues with its highs and lows, and you deserve to enjoy it and to make the best of it while you can. Because it goes by so fast, none of us is escaping death. Considering the fact that I study history and basically dead people, I actually feel very grateful and lucky to be alive at this very moment. Imagine the thousands of millions of people whose lives ended, but we are alive. You and me, we are alive at this very moment. Isn't it crazy? It's crazy. In any case, I love the idea that parting away in death is a temporary farewell. It does make death less scary and more like a natural part of the cycle of life. It's also interesting that she's quoting popular philosophers of her lifetime. She takes her wisdom from the works of Cato and Seneca. Her farewell message isn't something that she just thought of herself. We really get a window into the beliefs of ancient Romans, and clearly they did believe in the afterlife and even in the reunification of people in that afterlife. Last but not least, this is my favorite piece of history ever so far, and the most heartbreaking thing I've ever read. In April of 1998, after excavating an ancient tomb in Andong City in South Korea, archaeologists found the coffin of Untitled, now mummified. He was a member of the ancient Goseong-yi clan and died at 30 years old. Resting on his chest was the following letter. To the father of one, you always said to me, we'll be together until our hair turns gray, then die together. So how could you go and leave without me? Whom should I and our child turn to? How should we live? How could you leave us all behind and go on your own? How did you feel about me, and how did I feel about you? Each time we lay together, I asked you, dear, do other people love and cherish each other as we do? Are they like us? How could you forget my words and abandon me? I cannot live without you. I want to go to you quickly, so please take me to you. I cannot forget the feelings I had for you in this life. There's no limit to my sorrow. I don't know if I can go on. Where do I put these feelings that I have while raising a child that misses their father? Please read this letter, then come to me in my dreams and reply to me in detail. I wrote this letter because I want to hear your detailed response in my dreams. Please read this closely and tell me. You told me that after a child was born, you would see and have something to say. And now you've left like this. When the child in my womb is born, whom will they call father? Is there anyone who can comprehend my feelings? Is there any other such tragedy under the sky? You are just somewhere else. Are you really as sad as I am? There's so much more I want to say, but I can only write a rough outline. Please read this letter carefully and come speak to me in my dreams. I believe I will be able to see you. Please come secretly and show me. I got chills. I've read this letter countless times, I'm not even joking, and still I get chills reading this. It's one of those moments when I just can't believe it's real life. This is an actual human being 500 years ago who wrote about the most tragic situation of her life, and we have access to it. It's as if her grief was so enormous that it had to travel the centuries and reach us. There's a divine quality in this process alone. She left a trace of her feelings and her life, not knowing that people from another time and place would be reading her translated words and talking about it through the internet. Wow. Next to the letter were sandals woven from the wife's own hair. I read that in ancient culture, leaving the sandals means that she won't leave. Sandals also occur in Korean literature as a symbol of love, hope, and recovery from an illness. You notice how angry she is. She's angry that she is being abandoned. In this state of total vulnerability and desperation, she is pleading with her husband, why did you leave me? This is not how our life was supposed to be, especially as she is pregnant and already has a child, who will no longer see his father. This part really got to me. How did you feel about me, and how did I feel about you? Each time we lay together, I asked you, dear, do other people love and cherish each other as we do? Are they like us? How could you forget my words and abandon me? To me, this is proof that they really were in love. When two people are in love, they inhabit their own little universe, and as time goes on, the lore of that universe expands. Once you realize how rich and fulfilling it is to share this little bubble with someone else, you can look from the outside and wonder, are other people loving as much as I am right now? Do they also have this complex inner life that they share with someone? Towards the end of the letter, she asks, are there other people going through this tragedy? She experienced the greatest love and the greatest grief there is. When I first posted this letter as a short video, I had people commenting that they were actually envious of this woman because the way she was writing showed how much of a deep connection she had with her husband. She felt love. And being able to experience that is a privilege in and of itself. Grief is the price we pay for the privilege of loving. The greater the grief, the greater the love. It's two sides of the same coin. Her perfect little universe was shattered by the death of her husband, and right at the moment when their second baby was about to be born, they already had a child named Won, who was around 6 years old from what I read. He is going to experience grief for the first time at such a young age, and the other baby will have never known his father. The mother is just completely lost. It's the middle of her pregnancy. She's a widow with 2 children. Whom should I and our child turn to? How should we live? How could you leave us all behind and go on your own? Sadly, widowed women in the Joseon dynasty were not legally allowed to remarry, as they were expected to remain faithful to their deceased husbands. The wife was a noblewoman, so she probably had support going forwards. But it's still a very unfortunate and difficult situation. The body of Jung-tae was very well preserved. His tomb is actually rare since it also contained other written letters from his family members. His mummy measures 5 feet 9 inches, which is taller than most Korean men at the time. He had a dark beard and a charming appearance according to archaeologists. If I had to guess, the marriage of Jung-tae was most likely arranged or semi-arranged, but it was a case where both fell in love and cherished each other, which has happened throughout history. Love can emerge even in a political marriage made out of duty. The letter is both absolutely beautiful and infinitely mournful. I just hope she did see him in her dreams and received some sort of closure. The last thing I want to say is, if you find this kind of love, hold on to it with everything you have. This is the end. I hope you enjoyed, and tell me if you want more of these videos. I would be glad to make more of them. I'm still getting used to talking in front of a camera and not just emoting. So yeah, until next time, bye.